Hey everybody, so I wanted to talk about the most recent video from Todd in the Shadows that as of this recording went up just a couple of days ago. It's interesting because it gives me this opportunity to branch off into just a whole host of topics, especially as they pertain to the current the current political debacle, but there's religious undertones to it as well and that sort of thing. So we'll get into all of that in a minute, but first I just wanted to make sure you all knew I have restarted my Patreon. I've not done any kind of professional YouTubing in many years, but recent financial situations have just made it so that I need to open this up and see if there's people that are, or how many people are willing to contribute. There's been people already. I'm trying to build it up and grow the channel. This is certainly not meant to take away from me doing a good hard day's work. I have 2 jobs that I work already, and I would much rather not have to take on a 3rd one. So I'm going to use it proactively as an opportunity to grow the channel and start putting up content for my backers. Lately I've been doing music. This past month my backers got a sneak preview track of a classical album that I have coming out on November 1st, which is called Serenades for Mitzi, which is a tribute of set of classical chamber works written for my cat Mitzi. So anyway, I've been doing that, and I'm going to be bringing in more video essays and stories and other cool stuff like that. I have a lot of ideas of where to go with this. So if it's within your means, I would love to have you be a part of this, and I'm grateful to the people that have contributed already. I'm not trying to be a professional YouTuber or full-time professional YouTuber. I'd like to get up to about $800 to $1,000 a month, just to, supplement and add on to my existing income. So anyway, moving forward on that, I have to say Todd in the Shadows for a long time has been one of my favorite YouTubers. Even though his politics very often, when he alludes to his politics and gets very abrasive and passionate about that, it really grinds on my nerves. And, I've said it before and I'll say it again, Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire is someone that I would only agree with maybe 20% of the time. But he does have good observations now and then. And one of them was, he said, if you're a conservative, you just kind of get used to the reality that the people who make the stuff you like hate you. You just kind of learn to accept that the liberal, highly liberal entertainment industry hates your guts, and you just go on from there and just enjoy the things you enjoy that they put out. And I am not being some kind of dyed-in-the-wool conservative. That's been a very bitter and difficult pill for me to swallow. I find myself, like most reasonable people, taking a little from column A and a little from column B in terms of where I stand politically. And we live in a culture that doesn't have a lot of space for moderates right now. So, and I wouldn't even consider myself moderate per se. Like, I've always touted myself as being a left libertarian. But anyway, so I watched this new video from Todd in the Shadows, and it was about Kid Rock's most recent album. Now, one of Todd's best series is called Train Records. And Train Records is a series where he takes, every band has that album. Every artist has that album that's regarded as this kind of total failure. I shouldn't say every band, every artist, but artists that persist for a long time and stay with it for a long time or attain a certain level of success inevitably seem to have this album that is their stumbling point, the thing that derails all of the momentum that they had, hence the name Train Records. And it's interesting, that series I've watched because as a musician myself, I'm always interested in his insights into what caused these albums to fail, and he does a very good job of kind of digging into that. For example, he did one on Saint Anger by Metallica, which we all can point to the reasons that Saint Anger was not received well. The snare drum being the first thing that comes to people's mind, but the terrible production, the intentionally off-key vocals, the sound of intentionally creating the sound of a band that lacks any kind of cohesion, that sort of thing. And we also, I think everybody by now knows that Some Kind of Monster, the documentary, really destroyed a lot of the rock star mystique that Metallica had built up. So Todd touches on all of that, but then he gets into kind of delves, reads between the lines a little more, and comes to the conclusion that the reason Saint Anger happened and the reason all of that came about was because Metallica needed to put something out in order to keep functioning as Metallica. They were going to go extinct as a band with all of the internal tension if they didn't get an album out, get back on the road, and get the Metallica process happening again. And he makes a lot of good points about that. So I like that. I like the insights that he brings, and he's also brought to my attention one of my favorite musical oddities now, which is the Edgar Winter album Mission Earth. If you've not heard Mission Earth, this thing is absolutely incredible. It's fascinating on so many levels. But it was Edgar Winter's musical portrayal of the writings of L. Ron Hubbard, specifically his last and most poorly regarded novel series, Mission Earth, and it's like the material, the source material is so hilariously bad, and then Edgar Winter is a phenomenal musician, obviously. So you've got this perfect storm of extraordinary talent and horrible science fiction writing, cliche hack science fiction writing coming together, and it's wonderful. It's musically enjoyable, obviously, but it's just surreal on so many levels. I love it. And I have Todd to thank for bringing that to my attention. But more recently, he's gotten more and more political in his videos. And to a certain extent, I can't blame him for that, because he comments on popular music, and there's been a lot of political popular music lately. He's talked about... He talked about, for example, the Oliver Anthony song "Richmond, North of Richmond," which I had enough of the very first time I heard it, and then it was just everywhere. But anyway, he talked about, one of the things that irked me a little in that video was he talked about what he called the power of right-wing spite buying, and the idea that, and I don't like that. I don't like that there's been this surge of conservative musicians, filmmakers, storytellers, that kind of thing, putting out independent projects that become successful. Movies like Sound of Freedom, for example, that was extraordinarily successful at the box office, and there have been other ones like that. And then Oliver Anthony putting out this song, and a lot of other songs like that have really taken off. And for him to call that right-wing spite buying, as if to say that they're only right-wingers or conservatives are buying that, not buying that material because it's actually stuff they enjoy, but because it's just supposed to be a fuck you to the left, I think is disingenuous and not reading the situation well at all. Now, granted, all of this happens in the shadow of the election of Donald Trump as president in 2016, which was just a giant fuck you to the left. So I get why, in light of that, if you're someone wholly and completely removed from this whole surge in right-wing independent media lately, I get why it might look like spite buying to you. But at the end of the day, after a point, I think you just have to realize that owning the libs, as it's called, is fun on Twitter, but there's only so much money people are willing to put down for that kind of one-trick pony concept. Um, and the proof of that, there's a show. It was considered, I think it was called like Mr. Normal or something like that. Someone will be able to correct me on this. But it was referred to as like Mr. Bircham to the next extreme, and it was a conservative animation thing that was just like meant to mock woke culture in the most wild caricature of a way, and it fell flat because it was just pandering to outrage and didn't have any of its own soul to it, you know. And when I say soul, it should mean there's something uniquely appealing about the thing above and beyond just appealing to current outrage. It's kind of like I mentioned Sound of Freedom. You know, the idea, at bottom, that movie is about fighting conceptually, whether you agree with how they go about it or not, is about fighting child sex trafficking. That should be something, that concept should be something that everybody right and left of center should be in favor of. It should be a human universal among all decent human beings. So that's what I'm talking about, versus something that has no independent spirit of its own and just feeds into the outrage machine. I think the shelf life for that sort of thing is extraordinarily limited. So anyway, all of this I was thinking about as I watched his Train Records episode on the most recent Kid Rock album. Was it Bad Reputation? And I'm sorry, I'm obviously known for going through, doing my videos off the cuff without editing them, and so I have to look it up. But yeah, Bad Reputation, that was it. Anyway, so in this one, Todd really doesn't focus very much on the music. He focuses more on Kid Rock's politics, and this is kind of brings about what I wanted to talk about, some of the things he said. Now, ultimately, at its core, Bad Reputation, the album, I've not heard much from it. My biggest exposure to it has been this video that Todd did. Well, I'll talk about my own views on Kid Rock in a minute, but the album seems to be, from a musical standpoint, pretty much boilerplate Kid Rock. From a auditory musical standpoint, it's not like he breaks off into, smooth jazz, or breaks off into polka or bossa nova or something, or does a lot of experimentation. It's pretty much just standard Kid Rock. And he's one of those artists, in a sense like AC/DC, where you pretty much know what you're getting when you get into it. You're getting maybe a new angle or a new perspective on an already familiar concept. And so from that, just to get into my own views on Kid Rock, I think about him. It's interesting. I grew up in the era in which he broke out. I was in junior high school when Devil Without a Cause hit. And I liked a lot of the tracks on it. I think Bull God is a very underappreciated track. I really like that one personally. And I was surprised it wasn't a bigger hit. Ba Wata Ba is an undeniable banger of a song. Cowboy was okay, but it got overplayed. And Only God Knows Why, it was his first foray into the country balladeer thing that he eventually, embraced altogether. But when he came out at that time when you had Korn and Limp Bizkit and all of that blowing up big, and there was very much this demand for these artists that sought to be a confluence of white trash and black trash culture. Bringing kind of just redneck white trash culture right up, merging that with an affinity for for ghetto gangster level black culture and that kind of thing. And that was what gave us the Korn and Limp Bizkit era. And it's so interesting to me because Kid Rock, as I think about the culture I was living in at the time, I was living in Mississippi, where a lot of, there were, as you can imagine, a lot of people that had an affinity for white trash culture, and a lot of people who had an affinity for black trash culture. And unfortunately, these two sides kind of maintain their distance, as you can imagine, in Mississippi 20 plus years ago. But this new music that emerged with Kid Rock and everything, that what we call now nu metal, by and large, it was very much a white phenomenon. It never really took off with the black community at all. And I don't like the concept of cultural appropriation I don't believe in smacking people down for quote unquote cultural appropriation at all. But that really was what it was. It was rock and country kind of reinventing themselves with elements of pimp culture and stuff like that. And so this comes along, and Kid Rock was, I remember I hung out with the kids that were into all of this stuff. The Korn and Limp Bizkit, were always mentioned as Korn and Limp Bizkit as if they were like part of one continuum. It was like the Beatles and the Beach Boys or something like that. And then even smaller artists, lesser known artists like, the hardcore band Zayo, which is still one of my workout albums or workout artists to this day. I put them on when I'm working out. It was a Christian hardcore band and stuff like that. So I hung out with that crowd. That was the people I related to and everything. And I was even a step beyond that into like, thrash metal and speed metal and stuff like that. But you get that idea, that kind of camp. And what's funny was, I really don't remember a lot of people talking about, from that camp, really talking about Kid Rock that much. Kid Rock was more something that it seemed like, the kids that I hung out with that like Korn, first and foremost, Korn were like gods to those kids. Like that was they were just taking their marching orders from Korn. Korn was the epitome of everything that they held in high regard. And then Kid Rock seemed to be something that was more appealing to the college preppy crowd that was like the Red Cups party on the weekend football kind of crowd. It was so interesting. Like, he was very much a product of the nu metal era. He's not thought of as nu metal, though, even though his first album is largely a work of rap metal, undeniably. But he takes off, and he took off more. It's funny, it seemed to take off more with, in my experience, the people who wanted to play at white trash culture and black trash culture rather than the people who were authentically a part of it. And I think that's so interesting to me because if you look at Bob Ritchie, the Kid Rock's real name is Bob Ritchie. If you look at Bob Ritchie's background, he comes from extreme affluence and extreme privilege. He has a lot more in common with the the kind of his growing up. He had a lot more in common with the blue-blooded, aristocratic, do you have any idea who my father is types of people than he does with the he does with the blue-collar, salt-of-the-earth people that he tries to ingratiate himself to. And I thought it was so interesting that he took off, in retrospect, he took off more with the preppy crowd, the preppy frat boy crowd, than he did with the, the white trash crowd that was getting into Korn and Limp Bizkit and Insane Clown Posse. But all of that stuff, he took off more with that crowd. And I think it's because, I really feel like it's because at a certain level, it's a game-recognized game thing. The people who are actually from the slum level of society, I think, kind of realized on some level that how fake he was. And he was more embraced by, again, the people who, want to go out and have a wild party weekend, but come back to their upscale, affluent lifestyle. And that seems to have always been his shtick and his audience. And I bring all of that up because Todd pointed out throughout the video that this album, Bad Reputation, was meant to be a full-scale embracing of MAGA culture and of people, just a full-scale deep dive into MAGA culture. And with that, Todd points out that if you listen to what Kid Rock says, he doesn't seem to really believe the MAGA line. Throughout interviews, everything, he's very uncomfortable about actually getting behind his, really articulating what his politics actually are. He's very tiptoes around real deep discussions of it. And this album seems to be a lot of MAGA bluster without a lot of authenticity behind it. And again, I think it really does come back to the fact, and I'm building on what Todd said. He didn't get too much into this, but I think it comes back to the fact that Kid Rock really is not authentic. It is an act. You talk about, like, he now lives in Nashville, and he has this, this big sports bar club thing in Nashville and everything. And that's what he's pandering to. Real white trash culture does not have the money to go patronize an establishment like the one he started. The preppy, blue-blooded douchebags that do have that kind of money, and they want to go play at being poor white trash on the weekends. So that's really, I think, the audience he's always really ingratiated himself to. And there has always been that aura of falsity about him. The other Detroit rapper, white Detroit rapper that comes up obviously is Eminem, and Eminem is authentically from he is authentically from the slums and from the gutter of society, and there is a realness to it. And I think you listen to the difference between how Kid Rock portrays that life as some kind of utopian world, utopian wonderland, versus Eminem, who's coming from the actual authentic hardship of it and that sort of thing. It's very different. But anyway, whatever the case, Kid Rock, came out, and unlike, if you think about Korn and Limp Bizkit and those bands, they did a full synthesis of these cultures. They produced something new, a unique new thing in you, I guess, new thing that was a synthesis of these cultures, versus Kid Rock always had this thing of, like, I'm going to give you an undiluted dose of both of these cultures and see which one embraces me more and lean towards that going forwards. And predictably, it was not his rap, it was not the rap community that embraced him. It was the rock and country community that embraced him, and his future records veered off in that direction almost entirely. So why do I say all of this talking about Todd's rather harsh rebuke of Kid Rock in this Train Records episode? Well, it's because Todd, one of the messages that Kid Rock conveys, and again, I don't think this is, I'm not saying that there's anything authentic about these messages at all. I don't, I honestly would not be at all surprised if Kid Rock secretly votes Democrat. I mean, I'm not looking for any authenticity in what he says in the messages. But in one of the songs that Todd critiques, he talks about Kid Rock, Kid Rock presenting this vision for how, in one of the songs, for how we could all get along, and there's lines that something to the effect of like that his vision for America includes the NRA and the NAACP. It's this very much this like let's all join hands and be friends kind of thing. And that is, while I would certainly rather live in a world where the two factions of this country could get along better and could work better, one of the things, the thing is both of these perspectives have diverged to such a degree that that's really not going to happen. The thing is, for both of these sides to get together and work together and coexist, they have to be comfortable admitting that sometimes they're going to be right about things and sometimes the other side is going to be right. And neither one of these sides can budge on these things at all. We have reached a point, we've reached like the, we've reached the final threshold, I suppose, event horizon of the evolution of the left and the right, where you have issues where neither side can concede any ground. Neither side is ever going to admit that one side is right, or neither side will ever concede that the other side is right about something for the sake of working together and moving forward in the best possible direction. There's so many issues now where that's the case. What am I talking about? I'll give you two words: transgender bathrooms. See? And now here's the thing. I know that and by the way, I'm using that as an example. I do not want to have a transgenderism discussion. Do not start discussing it in the comments section. I will block you. But anyway, now here's the thing. I'm sure in Todd's mind, as he articulated his views in the Train Records episode, he would say, oh, well, the transgender bathrooms thing is very easy to resolve. It's just the people on the right that are being difficult about it, And yeah, it looks that way. The only reason it looks that way is because you're not willing to entertain anything from the other side. And to be fair, the right's not willing to entertain anything from the left on this matter either. There's no attempt to find any common ground. It's literally an issue of both sides saying my way or the highway. And there's so many issues like that. But in the case of Todd in the Shadows, he says to Kid Rock at one point, in response to that utopian kumbaya worldview that Kid Rock's apparently advocating in the song, he says that it's your side, entirely and always your side, the right, the conservatives, that are the ones that can't get along. You're the ones that can't get along. It's always you. You're the ones who don't want to peacefully coexist, etc., etc. And that's the thing. This is where, understand, my regular viewers already know this. I hate Donald Trump. I don't mind putting it in those terms. I hate Donald Trump. I am voting for Kamala next month. I'm going to be very proud to vote for Kamala next month. And I am not just to defeat Donald Trump, but I'm very enthusiastic about what she and Tim Walz bring to the country. But I also know that it's not going to heal the divide in this country. That takes more than just who the president is. So the ultimate the thing of it is, though, looking at that attitude of like, it's what, where is Todd coming from in that it's always your side that won't do anything. He literally falls into that trap, because honestly, I think if he were to be truly honest with himself, and truly honest with the bigger picture of this, the right would turn around and say exactly the same thing to him. And so, and the same thing to his side, we're not the ones being difficult, you are. And so I wonder, though, what is unique to the left right now in this discussion that Todd is glomming onto that doesn't seem to be there on the right by my perspective. And this is what I wanted to comment on specifically. And what it seems to be is that there is a utopianism on the left. I think that in a lot of ways is endemic to the left. And there's this kind of attitude on the left of like a utopian vision for society and for existence, and a fundamental belief that anyone who disagrees with any part of that utopian vision is a power-mad bigot that's trying to hold on to the old ways for the sake of exerting power over the weak and that sort of thing. And to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, I'm going to use 3 examples, and I'm going to give my positions on 3 controversial examples and give you what I have gotten, and in many cases literally gotten these exact words from people on the left. Okay, take the issue of the pay gap, the gender pay gap. Well, I am all for women being in the workplace, and I grew up surrounded by career women. I hold them in high regard. And I know that there have been a great many social struggles that women have had to deal with to integrate into and thrive in the workplace. However, the idea that women make 75 cents on the dollar that men make, that myth, that is a zombie lie that comes from adding up the total amount of money made by women versus the total amount of money made by men, not from an examination of what men and women one-to-one comparison in the same jobs make against each other. And I've gone into greater detail about that and talked about it and all of that as I started learning more about economics and these kind of economic myths and that sort of thing. So if I try to express that, and I express all of the ins and outs and the intricacies of the reality of that and how it's not the problem you think it is, the response I've consistently gotten from the left has always been, whatever, you just hate women. And like I said, in some cases it's been literally those words, but it's just, whatever, you just hate women. Okay, let's take another issue. Reparations. The idea that the U.S. government ought to make a gesture of stimulus money divided up among the black community that would be reparations for the work that slaves did in the time of slavery, that the black community would finally be paid for that work that was done. Okay, do I think that's a good idea? No, but here's why. It's been demonstrated in study after study, time and again, that human nature will not allow people to hold on to money that they win by chance or that sort of thing. Like, most people who win the lottery are broke again within 5 years. And so that's the thing. If you and we saw manifestations of that, for example, in during the COVID pandemic, when that stimulus money was sent out. A great many people put their money in cryptocurrency and that kind of thing. Like, it's not just about giving people the money, it's about knowing that that money is going to have the desired effect. And Dave Chappelle, who's certainly a very left-leaning person, lampooned this idea on Chappelle's show that, yeah, if you drop money, if you just throw money at the problem, drop a big pile of money on the problem, that's not going to help. People by and large will spend that money on themselves, and they'll have kind of a period of a years long spa day for themselves, and then they'll be broke again, and it will be right back where we started. So just from a human nature standpoint, that's why I don't think it would work. The other thing is, if what you're essentially talking about, there's going to be this net loss in terms of the quality of race relations in this country, because what's essentially going to happen is, to make that payment to the black community, you would have to essentially raise taxes on white people, and that's going to tank race relations. If there's literally a tax imposed on white people, like, you think they're being mean and curmudgeonly now, oh my God. And then the third and final reason is that I don't think we could realistically afford it as a country, but also because once you get into the nuts and bolts of reparations and you start breaking down people's genealogical records, you're going to run into some real problems. You're going to run into black people that don't qualify for reparations, and white people that do qualify for reparations. And that's where it's going to get really dicey. And so, okay, I'm bringing all of these things up. Again, I'm not trying to get into an argument about reparations. I don't want to hear what your personal perspective is on it. I'm using this to make a point. Okay, so that's one thing. And if I try to express those ideas and say, well, here are some realistic concerns about it, the response you get, again, very often, the response I'll get very often in these exact words is, whatever, you just hate black people. And part of that is because people would rather deal with a simplistic answer that reaffirms their existing worldview rather than take on a bunch of new information that might change their worldview. And that's true of all people on all sides. But there's also this utopian element on the side of the left. Then to go back to to use the trans example, I'm giving you three examples of three kind of things that the left has targeted from an activist standpoint. The issue of transgenderism. If you were to ask me for my perspective on it, sincerely and honestly, I don't want to go into personal details, except suffice to say, there was a time when I was 100% on board with transgenderism and the LGBT advocacy and all of that. But then I started to see some very, very negative and upsetting side effects of the current boom in popularity of transgenderism. This was things that went back, close to 10 years ago even. Started to see those things manifest in my own life before people like Matt Walsh and Abigail Schreier and Helen Joyce and all those people were sounding the alarm about trans issues. I was seeing firsthand some of the very upsetting things that result from, some very upsetting health concerns that result from that. Some of the ways young people are getting bad information and getting swept up into things that really don't apply to them and things they really shouldn't be getting into. And this is true of some larger trends within the LGBT community as a whole, unfortunately. And all of that, and I've seen from a personal standpoint, I've seen things and experienced things, again, much of it before I had ever heard about these people that are sounding the alarm about transgenderism in general, that give me pause and make me say, I can't sign off on this like I used to. I am not motivated by hatred in my heart. As someone who is neuroatypical himself, I am very well aware of how distressing and difficult it can be to try to integrate into a world that seems fundamentally not designed for you. You have my sympathy in that regard, and I absolutely would never want anybody to be abused or mistreated or hurt in any way because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. However, there are things that present real moral dilemmas and real ethical concerns for me. And of course, if you try to put those things into words, the response is going to be, whatever, you just hate trans people. And so like I said, part of that is because people, when they say that, they're not protecting themselves. They're not. What they're doing when they say things like that. Really, they're protecting themselves from ideas they're afraid might be right. Like I said, people like to hold on to simplistic beliefs that reinforce their existing ideas rather than entertain the idea that there's a broader spectrum of perspectives and attitudes out there. So, in all of those cases, again, in all of those cases, I swear to you, I do not hate any of those people. You're talking about ideas that have been advanced to try to make people's lives better that I don't think are going to work. But it is not at bottom a rooted in a desire, rooted in a hatred for those people. It's not. And I know what I think, and I know what's in my heart, and I'll thank you not to tell me what's in my heart when you certainly do not know. But anyway, I bring all of those examples up to say that I think I have an idea of where the utopian vision on the left comes from. We live in a culture, the first world is very much dominated by Judeo-Christian values, even among atheists and that sort of thing. The humanitarian agendas that are advanced by so many atheist groups and that sort of thing are rooted in the fundamental validity of the ideas that were advanced for hundreds and actually thousands of years by people espousing a Judeo-Christian worldview. And I think one of the reasons that the worldview of Jesus Christ does not seem as avant-garde and groundbreaking now as it used to is that we have so integrated those values into our worldview and into our first world culture that they seem passé. They don't seem that significant anymore. But if you went back to the time of ancient Rome, the time of Jesus, and you looked at the culture that he was responding to, he was responding to a culture of might makes right, a culture of the strong dominating the weak, a culture of brutal, violent, vicious, only the strong will survive attitudes. And that was ancient Rome at the time. That's why, people kind of lose perspective on things like when the Apostle Paul is railing against sexual immorality, and they assume that what he must mean like people having sex outside of wedlock, which while he probably would not have been enthusiastic about that, what he's really talking about is the kind of sexual immorality that was going on at the time in ancient Rome, where you had, for example, prostitutes that people that were born into sexual servitude as prostitutes, and when the women got pregnant, if they would have the babies would immediately, either if they were boys they would be killed on the spot, or if they were female they would be sent off to be to grow up and be trained to become prostitutes and that kind of thing. The kinds of things like with the admonishing of homosexuality, Paul's admonishing of homosexuality is rooted very much in the fact that Roman soldiers would rape the men in the armies they conquered and that kind of thing. You're talking about very heinous things that are not on the table in the first world any longer. And so anyway, at the time, those ideas were very new, but they got integrated into our culture. And what's interesting is the left and the right adopted different aspects of this worldview. Very few of them seem to want to put it together. The left adopted the ideas of blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the poor at heart, that kind of thing. The things related to charity, protecting the weak from being victimized by the strong, advocating for a worldview where we can all get together and we function off of an ethos of love and compassion for one another. That really took off with the left. With the right, what really took off was this worldview of that we live in a fallen world, that we are born into sin, that we must work to work to build up the character necessary to be a proper functioning member of society, all of that stuff, the strong admonishing father figure aspect of it. These two things kind of caught on with the left and the right, but for better or for worse, they're both grounded in the Judeo-Christian ethos, and they both contributed to giving us the modern world. And so I bring all of that up because what the left advocates for, I think, even at a secular level, it now considers to be self-evident. The ideas of building up or protecting the weak, ideas of large-scale charity to support the downtrodden and that sort of thing. It holds those ideas to be self-evident, but those ideas were not always self-evident. They've just become deeply ingrained. And so you have kind of this divergence where there are counterbalances on both sides. The right-wing embrace of the "we live in a fallen world" thing needs to be counterbalanced by the left wing's charity, sense of charity, and blessed are the meek and blessed are the merciful. These things need to counterbalance each other within all people. They all have necessary balancing elements. And so I bring that up because I think the left has always operated, the modern left, I should say, by which I mean what's developed in the last 100 or so years, 150 or so years, continues to operate off of this ethos of like, we can build a perfect world and we can build towards this perfection and that sort of thing. And we can have this perfect society if we just arrange everything perfectly. And we arrange everything in opposition to power. It comes back to this idea of like, anybody that opposes us at bottom is just trying to hold on to power. They're just trying to hold on to power so they can subjugate the weak. And that's the only thing, and that's the only idea that they'll ever entertain. And because that's the only idea that they'll ever entertain, they that's where you get the people who say, whatever, you just hate women, whatever, you just hate black people, whatever, you just hate trans people, all of that. The reason they counter it that way is because they have either been taught or taught themselves that that it all comes down to power, it all comes down to people bidding for and vying for power, and any opposition they get must be rooted in this bid for power, and anyone who denies that it's a bid for power has a false consciousness. And so what they need is something that's only available on the right that the left really won't touch, and that's that idea, that's that other component. Again, these things kind of broke off. It's that other component, which is the idea that we live in a fallen world. I think that idea of living in a fallen world prevents the right from having that same utopian vision that the left has. The right embraces that fallen original sin concept and knows that we're not going to be able to have that utopian world. Now, don't get me wrong, the right manifests in a lot, the toxicity of the right manifests in a lot of other horrible ways that I've talked about at length on this channel, and I'm certainly not negating that, but I'm trying to kind of put the pieces together for where Todd's attitude of, it's always your side that's doing this, I'm trying to kind of maybe get at where he's coming from, where he's getting that. And so, now, the thing is, the right, with its strong admonishing worldview and, you're born into sin and you're a piece of shit and you have to humbly repent and all of that stuff, the problem is they reject, I think fundamentally, although they would probably deny it, fundamentally reject all of the stuff about, blessed are the meek, blessed are the humble, blessed are the merciful, all of that, all of the things that stop this from manifesting as the Spanish Inquisition and stuff like that. And so I think that's the counterbalance there. These two sides need to come together, and they both fundamentally have things to offer. And they're meant to. These two sides are meant to balance each other, and they're meant to work together to find the ideal solution. Right now, we've got this unceasing gridlock where it's going to be right or left, either or, and so it's and that's not what this country is supposed to be, and that's not what a diplomatic, democratic form of government is supposed to be. And I will again thank you not to write in about how this isn't a democracy, it's a representative republic, because yada yada. I've heard it all. I've heard it all. You're not going to tell me anything I don't already know in that regard. Anyway, but that, I feel like, is at bottom what is fueling kind of the rage that Todd seems to have, where he comes at it as, it's always you, it's always your side, you're the ones that can't get along, that kind of thing. Because it's like, I think on his side, you know, the orthodoxy of his side, his political side in all of this, is that they have the utopian vision. They've got the utopian vision, and they're going to make it work. And if you're not going along with it, the problem's on your end. And that is a very myopic way of looking at the world, and it's a very disingenuous way of looking at the world. There has never been a time in history when a society went hardline left or hardline right and thrived. Societies, the longest lasting societies, are the ones that have a sense of balance. And that even goes back to the ancient world. And so, well, the ancient world, after a certain point when it realized that diplomacy and trade and working towards mutual benefit was superior to brute force and wars of conquest and all of that. But these societies that go hard in one way or the other are inevitably doomed to fail. They lack the counterbalancing elements that they need. And I'm sure this is a lot deeper than Todd ever intended to go in this video that was just supposed to be him emptying his spleen about Kid Rock. But that's what really spoke to me about all of this, is that attitude of, it's always you, it's always your side, you're the ones that are not getting along, and that kind of thing. You know, it's amazing how anyone could say that. You would have to almost be willfully blind to the nature of popular discourse right now. And that's the thing. If the one of the things I like, by the way, about the Harris Waltz team and the Harris Waltz campaign, is they have really put the left-wing utopian vision on the back burner and played it straight down the middle. They have done a beautiful job of speaking to the real important issues about the economy, about business. I really like, by the way, Kamala's plan for tax credits for starting small business and that kind of thing. That's certainly not all the way into the realm of a free market utopia, but I like that a lot better than Donald Trump's bullshit about putting trade tariffs on foreign goods to bring back domestic jobs. Again, he tried that the first time and it didn't work, and I don't know why people think it's going to work again this time. But anyway, that's where we are. And the left has got, on some level, to understand that utopian edifice they've built, it's a Tower of Babel. There's a reason, going back to the Judeo-Christian mythology, there's a reason the Tower of Babel is torn down. It's because fundamentally human beings don't have the capacity to bring about that kind of utopian vision. That's what that story's trying to get across. Fundamentally, we cannot build the tower going up to heaven and that sort of thing. We don't have the capacity for bringing about a utopia. And I feel like, that's more than Todd would ever want to hear, and I don't think he's ever going to watch this video. But that's what really struck me in all of this. The right and the left are deeply polarized right now. And to say the very least. And the thing is, they both keep looking at the other side for the source of that polarity. They never look at, they never look within, they never turn the lens back on themselves to see what source of polarity, where they are the source of that polarity. And that's a very important Christian concept of removing the plank from your own eye before you remove the sliver from your brother's eye. Rick Warren one time pointed out in a sermon, this is where I heard this just as a citation, but I heard him point out that in what you have to understand is a lot of these proportional statements that Jesus makes, things like if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out, or it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter heaven. All of these things are actually, a lot of those things are actually meant to be funny, because culturally ancient Hebrew humor was structured around grandiose comparisons. So, comparing size comparisons to the point of ridiculousness, that was a very popular laugh line. And if you understand that, you understand when he says, remove the plank from your own eye before you take the tiny sliver out of your brother's eye. He's trying to say, like, man, you think it's all that guy over there, and the problems you're bringing, the plank, you've got a fucking plank of wood in your eye, not just a tiny speck of wood in your eye. You've got this fucking plank jammed in your eye, and you think the speck over there is the problem. And it's meant to be absurd. It's meant to be ridiculous and silly, what he's trying to say. It's like, as Rick Warren pointed out, you've literally got people hearing that and laughing and say, "You're killing me, Lord." They're laughing it up. And it's supposed to be funny, and it's supposed to make a point. And it's this crucial point. It's that thing that neither side gets, that, like, turn the lens in on yourself. If you want that unity, you want if you want to come together and have that unity, you begin by turning the lens in on yourself. C.S. Lewis wrote, I am really running out of time. It's not a good time to introduce a new concept, but read The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis, which is a story, obviously a work of fiction, but it's a fantasy story about damned souls from hell being allowed a day pass into heaven to see if they can stay. And it's actually very difficult to stay in heaven, because you have to have a lot of personal spiritual development to stay in that world, whereas hell is very easy to be in, actually, paradoxically. And the souls get to heaven and they step out on the grass and cut their feet, because they are so thin in their spiritual growth that the blades of grass cut their feet, and they have to grow spiritually just to be able to walk on the grass in heaven. And it seems very paradoxical that heaven takes all this work to exist in, whereas hell is a default. But that's a very powerful metaphor for spiritual growth, and it's constantly in that story, C.S. Lewis is having these souls meet angels. They're being shown around heaven by George MacDonald, which, to put that in perspective, it would be like having Neil Gaiman show you around the afterlife nowadays. But anyway, the author George MacDonald is showing them around the afterlife, and they keep meeting these different angels, and the different people become enraged by the things that the angels are telling them, and they turn around and leave heaven. And it's all of these things of, like, you need to look within yourself, and people say, no, the problem is out here, it's external to me, this is unfair, this is not right. And they turn around and they say, no, you need to look within yourself. From a Jungian standpoint, Jung always said that whatever annoys you about other people is a window into your own internal issues. And that's very much what spoke to me here. This seething anger that I'm seeing from Todd. He's always been funny, he's always been dry and sarcastic, but this is really, like, there's some real passionate anger on display here, and he stands up and storms out, somewhat, I think, staged and dramatically storms out at the end of the video. And it really said to me, like, this is a person that's enraged by the other side, and what he should be doing that is using that as a window into his own a window into his own soul and into his own heart. And I think if he did, he would be struck by how much intolerance and injustice there is there. And that's not to put him down. We all have that. Again, we are all fallen. We all have that. We all have to go in and do this internal work. And so that's what strikes me. And again, why do you get these angry responses? Why do you get angry responses from people and things like that? The whatever, you just hate blank kind of responses. Because, I forget who said this, but it's absolutely true. If you make people think that they're thinking, they will love you. If you make people actually think, they will hate you. And when I learned that, I gained a great deal of insight into why I get some of the responses I do. And I thought, I can actually check myself on this. I don't need to make people think, like, think about things critically all the time, that kind of thing. I mean, obviously, if you're coming to see it in my YouTube video, you are de facto requesting to hear what I have to say. But I learned that. I realized, oh yeah, I don't have to bring people flush face first with the heinous reality of their ignorance all the time, that kind of thing. But that's what I took away from this, and that's what I hope would be food for thought for everybody.